There's a professor down in North Carolina. Wrong way. And his name is Bart Ehrlman. He's a professor of New Testament theology, New Testament down at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Now, if you look at his educational background, he seems to be your kind of prototypical, conventional evangelical Christian. He did his undergrad at Wheaton College and then did his master's and his PhD at Princeton Theological. And that was actually early on. That was like in the 80s. So he's a little bit older. But in about 2000, he had what he would call a change of mind. I know it's a bit hard for you to read here, but here's what it says. This is from his Wikipedia page. Ehrlman pronounced that he progressed from evangelical belief to agnosticism, identifying the problem of suffering as divisive. He has written, "The problem of suffering became for me the problem of faith," and has said, "I no longer go to church, no longer believe, no longer consider myself a Christian. I simply didn't believe that there was a God of any sort." This question of suffering is one that people wrestle with. I remember a little while ago, I was talking to an undergrad student who's involved in campus ministry, and she had asked me, what do you do when someone asks you the question about suffering? Like, how can there be suffering if there's a God? If God is really God, as the Bible claims he is, how can there be suffering? This is a question that people have always been wrestling with. And sometimes with this question, right? Sometimes people try to approach it from a philosophical or maybe a more rational perspective, but a lot of times I found that there's actually a visceral, emotional response to this question. A few days ago, you might have seen that there was this whole incident down in Minnesota. And I remember in that moment, I was, on a Saturday morning, I was washing dishes, and I'm clicking away on my playlist, and all of a sudden this thing comes up, and I was like, what is this all about? And at first you look at it, and I have to admit, there was a moment where I'm watching this video for the first time, where a man seems to be on the ground. I didn't have exactly the entire context, but this man is on the ground. It seems like there's 5 or 6 other guys on top of them, subduing him, and next thing you know, you hear gunshots. And you've probably heard about this already. You've heard about the responses from different people. Some of those responses, you kind of look at and go, what are you talking about? And you stand there as if, like, what the? God, what are you talking? What is going on here? This is not normal. This is not the way we think that things are supposed to be. So God, what is going on here? We have those reactions, don't we, when we see things? I mean, the whole thing with Alex Peretti in Minnesota, that's been the headlines for the last few days. But there's also other things that people are dealing with. In a month, we're going to be praying for Nigeria with a group of other churches. We'll tell you more about next week, about what this is. On Saturday, on March the 7th in the morning, we are going to have a service with other churches praying for Nigeria together. Because Nigeria, according to the Open Doors Canada, they are they're number 7 on their 2026 watch list of countries to pray for. And in fact, if you notice the one caption that has here, right? More Christians are killed in Nigeria than in any other country combined. And you look at that and you're like, God, what is happening? By the way, this watch list is actually one that we have on our email list that we send out every week. And so if you want to pray for those churches, that link will be there. But it doesn't always have to be something this big either. Because let's face it, there are people right now who feel abused, who feel bullied. Sometimes in their silence, they sit in a corner alone and they're asking, God, what the? Where's the justice? How could you allow this to happen? I mean, last weekend we had this whole snowstorm, right? We had all this snow coming. And I remember in the afternoon I was sitting there and I was thinking, what about the people right now who don't have a home? And I gotta admit, there was a moment I had of guilt. I'm grateful that I have a home I can be in, but there are others who don't. And a part of me wonders, God, what are they thinking? Are they thinking, what the, in the middle of this? So I remember last Sunday, I was sitting there, and I was kind of asking, again, God, what the God? I mean, like, what is this all about? Why? Sometimes you have no words for it either, do you? God, what the? And I was drawn to the book of Habakkuk. Now, some of you may or may not be familiar with this. Habakkuk is a book, is actually an Old Testament prophet. This prophecy was written about 600 BC or so, give or take. And when we say prophecy, prophecy doesn't necessarily just mean about predicting the future. Prophecy actually means that it's a word from God to the people at that moment. So it's not just here's what's happening later on. It's actually something that God is saying, I want you to say to the people this now. And so around this time period, just to kind of give you a little bit of perspective, quick little geography lesson, right? So this is in the Middle East. So if you look at a map, there's a Mediterranean Sea. This is on the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea. And in that, there's an area called, what we call Israel, this whole nation. Back then, especially around 600 BC or so, it was actually divided into two kingdoms. There was the northern kingdom called Israel. That's kind of like that dark, okay, my color blindness is kicking in here, but it's kind of like that, I don't know, I guess greenish, grayish top, all right? And then, so that's Israel, and then that kind of orangish below, that's Judah. Is that green? It's purple? Wow, my colors are so off. Okay, but that's part, so you have the northern kingdom, that's Israel, and you have the southern kingdom, that's Judah. So they used to be one kingdom together, but then later on, they got split into two. And so during this time, one of the things is that, especially if you read through the Old Testament prophets, over and over and over again, there's this whole conversation of the people of Israel who were supposed to be God's representatives, showing the rest of the world what does it mean to actually live the way God intended us to live. That was their whole purpose. But yet, over and over again, they kept on rebelling against God. They kept on doing things their own way. They kept on doing things that they just wanted to do, not the way that God wanted them to. And over again, there was these prophets who said, okay, if you keep doing this, something else is going to happen. I'm going to have to bring my justice in a different way. And the people didn't listen. They kept on doing it over and over. Sometimes they did, but they went back to this cycle over and over and over again. It gets to the point where about 730-ish BC or so, the major empire at that time, Assyria, comes and basically takes over the northern kingdom, Israel. So that's what those, I guess, what is that? Is that a blue line, I guess? Those blue lines? So basically, Assyria comes and basically wipes out the northern kingdom and exiles all these people. And that's where Habakkuk is in the middle of this. So he's living in Judah. He sees that this whole thing with Israel has happened. And he's going, God, what the? At the beginning of the passage, and there's several verses we're going to read through here. I'm going to invite for anyone who wants to read it out loud, feel free to. Just whether it's Mandarin or in English, whichever one, you can just read the verse out loud. So here's the first one. And so one of the things too is that there's all these other prophets around that time. Jeremiah, Zephaniah, Nahum. These are all the prophets who are all speaking about similar things at that time. And so we get to Habakkuk, chapter 1. This is verses 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to ask someone to read this, please.
How long, O Lord, must I call for help? But you do not listen. Violence is everywhere. I cry, but you do not come to save.
Okay, next person.
Must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all this misery? Wherever I look, I see destruction and violence. I am surrounded by people who love to argue and fight.
become paralyzed, and there is no justice in the courts. The wicked far outnumber the righteous, so that justice has become perverted.
Sound familiar? This is one translation, and here's how this reads. God, how long do I have to cry out for help before you listen? How many times do I have to yell, help, murder, police, before you come to the rescue? Why do you force me to look at evil, stare trouble in the face day after day? Anarchy and violence break out, quarrels and fights all over the place. Law and order fall to pieces. Justice is a joke. The wicked have the righteous hamstring and stand justice on its head. Habakkuk is standing there going, what the God? This is not the way that you said it would be. This is not the way that we believe that it was supposed to happen. This is not what your law said. This is not what you said you would do. And yet, God, we see this happening. So what the? And this is God's response. You go a little bit later in the chapter. This is his response. Actually, no, this is not his response. Because one of the, actually, I'm going to skip that, sorry. And so this is his response, chapter 1, verse 6. Someone read that, please.
I am raising up the Babylonians, a cruel and violent people. They will march across the world and conquer other lands.
So Habakkuk has this prayer, and he's asking, okay, God, what is going on here? What are you going to do about it? And then God responds, okay, you want to know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to send the Babylonians now to come take you over. So go back to that map where you had the Assyrians. This is 730 AD-ish or BC or so. They come, they take the northern kingdom, and now God is saying, by the way, the Babylonians who took over the Assyrians, they're going to come for you now. I mean, it's as if you went, it's as if you went to the Canadians and said the U.S. are coming. If you went to Greenland and said the U.S. is coming, right? If you went to Ukraine and said the Russians are coming. It's like, what are you talking about? This is your justice, God? Are you kidding me? Habakkuk actually responds in this way. Verse 12, can I have someone read that, please?
O Lord, my God, my Holy One, you who are eternal, surely you do not plan to wipe us out. O Lord, our rock, you have sent these Babylonians to correct us, to punish us for our many sins.
So even Habakkuk is saying, God, again, what the? Sometimes we feel paralyzed with that, don't we? We see this happening around us, and sometimes we wonder, okay, God, if you're really there, what are you going to do about this? If you are who you say you are, okay, what the? And then God responds. Actually, Habakkuk actually continues on and says, actually, can I have one of you read this, please?
But you are pure and cannot stand in the sight of evil. Will you wink at their treasury? Should you be silent while the wicked swallow up people more righteous than they?
So God responds.
This vision is for a future time. It describes the end, and it will be fulfilled. If it seems slow in coming, wait patiently, for it will surely take place. It will not be delayed.
So God says to Habakkuk and to the people, yeah, the Babylonians are coming, but that won't be the end. That is not the end. He makes his promise to them that there's a vision that he actually shares going on in the rest of chapter 2. And we're not going to read it all right now. I'm going to invite you to read through it. As over and over again, God reminds them that yes, even though these people are coming, yes, it seems like they're invincible. Yes, it seems like that they will gloat and that they're going to be arrogant and they're going to feel like as if they are invincible. And yet God says they may think that, but that is not the end. God says in the middle of this, if it seems slow in coming, wait patiently. And let's face it, it's hard for us, isn't it? In our instantaneous world where our food has to be microwaved in less than 10 seconds, right? If a web page doesn't actually come up within 3 seconds, we think that's slow. And yet God reminds them, wait patiently. As hard as it might feel, he says, wait patiently. For it will surely take place. And in God's timing, it will not be delayed. So when you read through that chapter, you almost feel this crescendo building in it. Right? Because he starts saying like these people who think they've got it, and yet they will be overturned. They think they have it all, and yet it will go away. They think that they are invincible and be remembered forever, and yet they will never be remembered. It will disappear like a vapor. And it gets to the point. This is chapter 2, verses 18, 19, and 20. It says, what good is an idol carved by a man, and a cast image that deceives you? How foolish to trust in your own creation, a God that can't even talk. What sorrow awaits you who say to wooden idols, wake up and save us, to speechless stone images you say, rise up and teach us. Can an idol tell you what to do? They may be overlaid with gold and silver, but they are lifeless inside. You can almost feel God saying to them, these things that you trust, these things that people think that they can trust in, these things that people think that they can just hold on to because it seems to give them security and value, and yet God says to them, they will not stand. They cannot stand. And if this was a movie right now, you can almost see like this welling, a building. You can almost see like God bringing this pronouncement to them. And at the very end of this verse, it's as if a choir had risen up. And in that moment, you would hear them say this. What do you say to the God of the universe when he says he is in his holy temple? And sometimes it is in the silence that we are reminded that he is God. It's interesting. You continue on in chapter 3, verse 2. And actually, if you read the beginning of chapter 3 there, it actually has this note that Habakkuk actually sings this prayer. Because when he has this revelation from God, that God is saying, even though what you see is going to happen, and yet that is not the final, that what he envisions, this idea that justice will actually come, will come, and that you have to wait patiently in the midst of that, and that in the silence, you might know that God is God. And then Habakkuk responds in a song and prayer. And this may not be the tune that he necessarily would have used. But perhaps it would have been something like, Lord, I have heard of your fame, and I stand in awe of your deeds. Oh, Lord, renew them in our day, and in our time make them known. In wrath remember mercy. One commentary listed it this way. He said, the need for an evident renewal of God's activity is acute. It is for this that Habakkuk prays. But appreciating that to pray for revival is to invite judgment, he asks that wrath, present turmoil, and future discipline be tempered with mercy. The fact is, if sometimes we ask God, let your justice come, and yet if his justice really came, oh, geez. It would not just be the people that we think it should come to, but it would come to us as well, because we are just as broken. We are just as guilty. And yet, because of Jesus himself, because of Jesus, God remembers his mercy. So what are some of the things that we can do? And these may not necessarily be things that are completely new, but they're good reminders for us. Like Habakkuk, we can pray. And sometimes people think of prayer as a sense of, we recite to God things that we want, which is part of it. But notice even in the book, that is not just him petitioning, these are the things, God, that I see happening, what are you going to do about it? But it's also now he receives God's message. In fact, later on in our service, we're going to take some time to pray together. We're going to pray through things that we see as injustices and ask God, remember your mercy in this. So one is prayer. Sometimes we need to potentially even check ourselves. What am I actually doing that might actually be contributing to the injustices around us? And I know that's a tough question sometimes. Sometimes we look around and say, but the people out there who are doing all this stuff, and yet how many times, whether because of we did it or because we decided to bypass it, that we actually didn't do what God asked us to do. So there is a level of introspection we need to have here, asking God, okay, what is it in these injustices that I actually contributed to that you want me now to change? Recognizing that this is going to be a long journey. It won't be something that will be turned over in 24 hours. It's going to take time. Time for healing. Time for restitution. Time for reconciliation. It will take time. Or perhaps out of your prayers, you might ask, okay, God, What is that next step? Sure, sometimes it seems like it is so big. Some of the injustices out there are so big. What do we even do with it? And yet God says, okay, let's start with prayer. How about you double check yourself to make sure that you're not doing something, you're not contributing to this? But perhaps there is one small next step for you to take. It's kind of like that one parable, right? Where a younger guy and an older guy are walking along the beach, and the older man picks up a starfish and tosses it into the sea. And the younger guy asks him, "Why are you doing that?" Because, he's saying, I'm trying to help save them. But the younger guy says, "There's all these starfish out there. How are you going to solve all of it?" And he's like, and he bends down, picks another one, tosses it in the sea. "Yeah, but that's the one I helped." So what is your next step? At the end of this passage, at the end of this book, verses 17, 18, and 19, I'm going to ask three of you to read this. Can someone read 17, please?
Even though the fig trees have no blossoms, and there are no grapes on the vines, even though the olive crop fails, and the fields lie empty and barren, even though the flocks die in the fields, and the cattle barns are empty, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God of my salvation.
The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer, able to tread upon the heights. For the choir, this prayer is becoming by string instruments.
That was actually beautiful. Stephen Habakkuk recognizes, even though things may seem grim, maybe things are not perfect, maybe things have yet to be fulfilled, and yet he says, I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in the God of my salvation, because the sovereign Lord is my strength.